because this is the best way to change. We can change with fear, but we're not going to go very far. We're going to change much further if we seek interest and if we seek global interest. Now, I think you've probably had a look at the Stern report. If you haven't had a look, I really strongly recommend you read this. Basically, Stern is an economist from the UK Treasury, and he's been analyzing the economics of climate change. That's already 2-3 years ago. Basically, what he's saying is that climate change could cost from 5 to 20% of GDP. Depends on, of course, how much the Earth is warming. But the cost, he placed it at 1%. Some other estimation place it a bit higher. I saw yesterday in the US, in the debate for the Waxman-Markey bill, so the US policy on climate change, that some are claiming that there will be 3.5% impact of climate change, climate change policy on the budgets and on the economy. I see that if we have even 3.5% and you will see the cost of inaction at 5%, it's still worth it. It's still worth it. We have other benefits coming from climate change policy, obviously reduced air pollution. Important dimension, which is the energy security, which is also something we're working on. If you reduce your energy consumption, you are less vulnerable to price hikes. You're less vulnerable to what could be attempt by some countries to play with their energy as a weapon. It is also potentially very good in terms of job creation and what we call the green economy, which is a paradigm that which is being developed pretty much everywhere. There are some skepticism about it, I hear sometimes, but I think in a whole we see that there is a need to move. There is a clear need to move from a highly carbon-based economy to a low-carbon economy, which will require a lot of innovation, which require also using a lot of solutions that already exist. Maybe I would like to close with a few ideas. And I was trying to think of what could be food for you when you do your work. And obviously not up to me to tell you what you have to write. This is your own business. But the difficulty I would imagine in climate change, if you want to blog on climate change, and if you want to blog ahead of Copenhagen, is that it's just extremely complex. And it's probably very difficult to say something in something relevant in a relatively small volume. Now, I've listed a few ideas over there. Maybe one date, which I wanted to mention, sorry. At the end of October, our heads of state will get together and discuss the details of our position on climate change. I think lots of it is already known. Lots of it is I already mentioned quite a few. Lots of it is already widely available, but it will get also into the matter of finance, which is a very important issue. You have to understand that we are going into one of the most complex negotiations in history. The finance will certainly play a part. There will be a part of poker game during the negotiation. It's important to understand this. Because if you start in a negotiation by putting all your cards on the table, it's going to be a bit difficult. So you must understand that accessing to information will not be difficult to access it. It will be difficult to understand the use of it strategically. It will be understand to follow the negotiation. I've highlighted a few things: the security threat, the human rights and migration, which is a very important issue on climate change. There are already talks about millions of climate change migrants. What is a climate change migrant? There are a lot of issues which are quite interested to investigate. Climate change and politics, which is one of my favorite subjects, is how can you make society change? Well, politics is one of the good ways to make society change because the politicians are the ones voting the laws. So it is important to see and quite interesting to see how the climate issues have been entering the political stage and how the politicians are positioning on climate change. No time for sleep. Yes, it is a complicated challenge to be a climate negotiator from whatever country. And the richer the country, I wouldn't say the less the challenge. But I remember being in the Bali negotiation, meeting the representative from Costa Rica, if I remember correctly. There were 2 people from Costa Rica to defend the interests of their country in a meeting like that. Can you imagine how complicated it is? The EU delegation is over 100 or 150, if not 200 people Costa Rica are 2. Is there a life after Copenhagen? What I meant was, how is the climate change regime going to operate? What institutions? Who will decide? If people do not respect their commitments, what will happen? That is also something which I believe would be quite interesting. Now, 2 tips. I simply would like to stay with this since there were some requests from tips. One, that was already mentioned, read, study, check your facts. It's very complicated, but you can get a lot of resources, a lot of good information on the Environment Agency side, on the Commission side, on the UNFCCC side, which is extremely well done, and also on national, on the websites of most countries. It is interesting to have a look at the national submissions of countries. Not always easy to read, not always easy to understand, but it's quite useful. If you can have access to the negotiating text, which are discussed now. Now it's 250 pages. It's a bit difficult to read. But if you have the courage to read that, and if you get most of it, it will be quite useful for your work because you understand where the issue lies. Last point, which would be my recommendation, place yourself in the shoe of the negotiators or other people, but then step back into yours. Very important. Place yourself in their shoes to understand what their constraints are if you want to cover the negotiation, but then step back into yours because you're not the negotiators, you're here to blog. And I think it's quite important to, that you keep a complete freedom of expression and obviously a complete freedom of assessment. But I think it is important to understand what they're doing. Yes, that one was in, I'm sorry, I thought you guys didn't want more polar bear, but okay, I have this one. This one was in Poznan, and I found it pretty cool. You have, I think, on the previous slides, you have some links. I will make my presentation available so you can have a look at these links. And I think I will stop here, pass the floor to my colleague from the environment agencies, and then we will take questions